Hello family, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, welcome. My name is Akubeze and I'm a Christian content creator based in Lagos, Nigeria. And I'm back with another episode of my Women of Faith / Kingdom Wives series, in which we are studying the great women in the Bible and learning lessons from their faith. So for the past few weeks, we have been studying the female ancestors of Jesus. And last week, we studied Bathsheba, who was actually a queen. She was married to King David. And it inspired the next batch of our studies, which is to study the king's wives. And this week, we are going back to the beginning to David's first ever wife, and that is Michal. Her reading was quite long, so I hope you did the assignment because I'll be skimming through and focusing on the parts that, stood out to me. But I would love to hear your contributions. I would love to hear if there's anything else that stood out to you. So we are starting from 1 Samuel 18. The title says Saul's growing fear of David. This immediately paints the picture. We are introduced to Michal at the end of this chapter, but I wanted us to read the whole chapter so you kind of understand the context of what is going on at this time. Saul was the first king of Israel, but he was not a man after God's heart, so God decided that he was going to replace him with David. Samuel was the prophet who anointed David, and David was the one who killed Goliath, and he came into fame, and all of that is like the background to where we are coming in this chapter. So it says that after David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return home to his family. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. Whatever mission Saul sent him on, David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the troops and Saul's officers as well. When the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul, with singing and dancing, with joyful songs and with timbrels and lyres. As they danced, they sang, Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. Saul was very angry. This refrain displeased him greatly. They have credited David with tens of thousands, he thought, but me with only thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom? He knew David was coming for his position, and it was obvious that God was with David. It says, from that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David. The next day, an evil spirit from God came forcefully on Saul. He was prophesying in his house while David was playing the lyre, as he usually did. Saul had a spear in his hand, and he hurled it, saying to himself, I'll pin David to the wall. But David eluded him twice. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David but had departed from Saul. So he sent David away from him and gave him command over 1,000 men, and David led the troops in their campaigns. In everything he did, he had great success because the Lord was with him. When Saul saw how successful he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he led them in their campaigns. Saul said to David, Here is my older daughter Merab. I will give her to you in marriage. Only serve me bravely and fight the battles of the Lord. For Saul said to himself, I will not raise a hand against him. Let the Philistines do that. But David said to Saul, Who am I, and what is my family or my clan in Israel, that I should become the king's son-in-law? So when the time came for Merab, Saul's daughter, to be given to David, she was given in marriage to Adriel of Meholah. Now Saul's daughter Michal was in love with David. He painted this as like a movie. The king is about to be dethroned, and the very man who is going to dethrone him, it's such an essential element of his kingdom. He uses him on the battlefield. In previous chapters, we're even told how David was playing the instrument to soothe Saul and all, and it is so obvious the torment that is in Saul. One moment he's telling us he's keeping him in his household and not letting him go back to his family. In another moment he's telling us he's so afraid of him that he's sending him away. But in all of this, the king's daughter falls in love with that very man. It says Michal was in love with David. And when they told Saul about it, he was pleased because he thought to himself, I will give her to him so that she may be a snare to him, and so that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Now, I want you to bear that in mind, and it was something I kept thinking about as I was reading the progression of Michal and David's relationship, how this word that her father had spoken over their marriage, like the background of their marriage, ended up coming to fruition. And it just taught me a lesson that, the context in which you enter a relationship, the foundation in which you start in marriage is so important. Like, even just what people are saying around you and what is bringing both of you together, like, pay attention to those things, because we'll see how this plays out. So Saul said to David, "Now you have a second opportunity to become my son-in-law." Then Saul ordered his attendants, "Speak to David privately and say to him, 'Look, the king likes you. His attendants all love you. Now become his son-in-law.'" They repeated these words to David, but David said, "Do you think it is a small matter to become the king's son-in-law? I'm only a poor man and little known." When Saul's servant told him what David had said, Saul replied, "Say to David, the king wants no other price for the bride than 100 Philistine foreskins to take revenge on his enemies." Look at what he's asking for as bride price. The foreskins of 100 Philistines. I remember that he said, he will give his daughter to him so that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. It's already playing out. But it says David took his men with him and went out and killed 200 Philistines and brought back their foreskins. They counted out the full number to the king, so David might become the king's son-in-law. Then Saul gave his daughter Michal in marriage. When Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that his daughter Michal loved David, Saul became still more afraid of him, and he remained his enemy the rest of his days. The Philistine commanders continued to go out to battle, and as often as they did, David met with more success than the rest of Saul's officers, and his name became well known. We move on to 1 Samuel 19. Saul tries to kill David. Saul told his son Jonathan and all the attendants to kill David, but Jonathan had taken a great liking to David and warned him, "My father Saul is looking for a chance to kill you." Not only the daughter was in love with David, Saul's son too took such a great liking to David. Like, when God's hand is upon you, you will find favor even in the midst of your enemies. But it says, let me just skim through this part. Basically, Jonathan warns David that Saul is trying to kill him, and Jonathan even goes ahead to confront Saul, like, "Why are you trying to kill David? Because he's done nothing but good to you." And Saul, Saul was clearly a tormented man. He will go through different phases. So he came to an awakening and was like, "You know what? I swear I won't kill him." But later that night, of course, he did try to kill him. He literally tried to throw a spear at him while David was playing the lyre for him. So we skip to verse 11, and it tells us that Saul sent David's men to watch it and to kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, warned him, "If you don't run for your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed." So Michal let David down through a window, and he fled and escaped. Then Michal took an idol and laid it on the bed, covering it with a garment, and putting some goat's hair at the head. When Saul sent the men to capture David, Michal said, "He is ill." Then Saul sent the men back to see David and told them, "Bring him up to me in his bed so that I may kill him." But when the men entered, there was the idol in the bed, and at the head was some goat's hair. Saul said to Michal, "Why did you deceive me like this and send my enemy away so that he escaped?" Michal told him, "He said to me, 'Let me get away. Why should I kill you?'" So Michal was instrumental in ensuring that David was saved from her father's, evil plans towards him, and she literally helped him escape and even covered up for him. And so the chase now begins. Saul keeps going after David, and eventually we skip to 1 Samuel chapter 25 verse 43, and we are told that David married other women while he was on this escape journey, and Saul also gave Michal to Paltiel, son of Laish, who was from Galim. So they are separated. David is on the run. He marries other people. Michal marries somebody else. And then we get to 2 Samuel chapter 3. We're told that the war between the house of Saul and the house of David lasted a long time. David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon, his secondborn Chileab, his third Absalom, his fourth Adonijah, his fifth Shephthela, and the sixth Ithream. All to different women, by the way. And so it just gives you context that a lot has happened in this time where David and Michal have been separated. Life has been lifing. But we are told that during the war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner had been strengthening his own position in the house of Saul. Abner was one of Saul's, commanders. And one of Saul's sons said to him that why did you sleep with my father's concubine, which was a false accusation. And so that really annoyed Abner, and he decided that, you know what, I'm going to give David the kingdom, because he knew he was essentially the commander. He was the one running things. And so Abner sent messengers to David, we're in verse 12, and he said, make an agreement with me, and I will help bring Israel over to you. Good, David said, I will make an agreement with you, but I demand one thing of you. Do not come into my presence unless you bring Michal, daughter of Saul, when you come to see me. Then David sent messengers to Ishbosheth of Saul, demanding, give me my wife Michal, whom I betrothed to myself for the price of 100 Philistine foreskins. So Ishbosheth gave orders and had her taken away from her husband at Paltiel. Her husband, however, went with her, weeping behind her all the way to Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, go back home. So he went back. So this is such a sad section of the story, because at this point you realize that, okay, David is still loyal to Michal. He's still fond of Michal. He remembers that Michal has saved him, even though he has had 6 children with 6 other women, and life has lived. But so he goes back and tries to reclaim her. He's like, if you want me to really take possession of this kingdom, I want my wife back, my wife who was wrongfully given to another man. But the weeping that we hear from Michal's husband lets me know that she must have, started forming a new life with this man, and maybe even fallen in love with this man. Though we don't hear her weeping, we hear him weeping. But still, it just lets me know that they had some kind of connection and bond. And so the separation will not have been easy. But in any case, they are separated, and David takes the throne. And by the time we get to 2 Samuel 6, this is where we see the fall of Michal, and a very big lesson that I think is so important for us to learn as women. We are told that David attempts to bring the ark back to Jerusalem. When Saul had gone out to battle, he had taken the ark with him, and that was even when he ended up dying. And so when David was coming back to Jerusalem, taking up his position as king, he decided to bring the ark back, but they did not follow the right instructions. Somebody touched the ark, and he ended up getting killed by the Lord. He was literally struck down by the Lord, we are told in verse 7. But so David decides to leave the ark in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite for 3 months, and we are told that in verse 11, the Lord blessed him and his entire household. And David was told that the Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has in it because of the ark of God. So David went up to bring the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. Wearing a linen ephod, David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sounds of trumpets. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, I thought it was interesting that they are still referring to her as the daughter of Saul, was watching from a window. And when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. Be mindful of what you do in your heart, what you meditate on in your heart. She had not yet said anything, but just looking at him from a distance, she had already started despising him in her heart. Why? Was it because she saw him taking her father's position? Was it because he was worshiping the Lord? And that situation with idols, where she put like an idol to replace him, almost it put a wrong imagery in me. Like, why was that the move that she thought to do? Like, did she worship idols? I was left with so many thoughts. But the point is that she despised him in her heart, and in verse 20, we are told that when David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, "How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servant, as any vulgar fellow would." Imagine talking to the king like that. Then imagine talking to your husband like that. And David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor." And Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. What a sad end to what seemed like, a wonderful love story, because she started off by loving him, saving him, and life happened. Like I said, it was a sad thing that happened to her, that she obviously remarried and then was separated from that husband. But some form of bitterness and contempt must have fostered in her heart. And so with the way that she treated her husband, she essentially degraded herself in his eyes by treating him with dishonor and disrespect and contempt. She lost the admiration and attraction that he had for her, because in watching a Bible study, I realized that she had no children to the day of her death, not because she was cursed or anything, but because he simply didn't call for her. He simply didn't ask to be with her. He simply did not get intimate with her, and as a result, she did not procreate. And so it was just a lesson to me that, in life, in marriage, we can start off on such a high note and be so in love and be so respectful and helpful towards our partners. But if we allow life to plant seeds of bitterness and anger and resentment in us, it can have a negative effect on everything around us. And the ripple effect is far reaching. And so we just need to be mindful about how we handle life's grievances, and always maintaining that sense of honor and love and admiration for our spouses. I can't help but think of that line in the Bible that says, better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof. And so, it's amazing to start off on a good note, but we need to be mindful of the value of longevity in the love and the honor and the respect that we show towards our spouses and those around us in general. I was watching this video by Mike Murdoch. He was talking about Apostle Joshua Selman and how honor heals and honor protects. And you see the value of honor beyond the intimate relationship of spouses, it is so essential in a kingdom marriage, in a kingdom relationship, but even just in our general interactions with people. Like, get rid of contempt, get rid of bitterness, get rid of envy, get rid of everything negative, and treat people with love and admiration, respect and honor through it all, even regardless of what life has thrown at you and the shege that you may have seen. Always try and maintain that sense of honor, love, and helpfulness in all that we do as women. So for next week, we are going to be moving on to the next wife of David, which is Abigail. And the reading is 1 Samuel 25, 1 Samuel 27, 1 Samuel 30, and 2 Samuel 2. I'll leave it in the description box. I know it's quite long, but I hope you do the assignment. And I love you, but never forget, Jesus loves you the most. Bye, fam.